say no before you let somebody else say no for you, right? Like don't
Mm,
reject yourself and like go
yeah.
out there and maybe something will happen if you shoot your shot. And that was a topic. Someone's like, okay,
Yeah.
like I'm trying to change my life. I'm trying to go into this new career path. I'm trying to do
Yeah.
this very serious thing. And they come to me and they're like, how should I do it? And I'm like, you should play a game.
Hey, Simeon, how are you doing today?
Good. Nice to see you, Day. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. Great to have you again. When we first spoke, we had a great conversation, and I realized, and we both realized that we had a lot of like things in common with regards to our journey, regards to like getting cybersecurity, and a bunch of other things as well. And also, you've been working on a really really cool and interesting project, KC7, which we're going to talk about a lot more later in the video. But I want to start the video by giving you an opportunity to like tell me more about yourself or tell the audience about yourself, like who is Simeon, and what's your journey been into cybersecurity?
Yeah, thank you. So, Simeon Kakbogi, of course, I've been doing cybersecurity pretty much my whole professional career since I was in college. And, like a lot of people, I didn't know that cybersecurity was a thing that I could do when I was growing up, right? It's never anything anyone talks about. People talk about like being a doctor, being a lawyer. And so when you think about like what a success looks like, those are usually the pathways that you think about. And so I was no different. I wanted to be a doctor when I was growing up, and I took a lot of science classes, and that's what I applied to college as. And then like right before college, I had an internship experience where I just kind of like looked myself in the face and thought like, could I be in a hospital for 8 to 12 hours a day? And I was like, oh man, that sounds like a lot of work. That sounds pretty lame. Or at least
Yeah,
lame for me, right? Like I couldn't do it. I would get bored. I would not succeed in it. So I
yeah.
decided I would try something else. And uh, I decided I would try doing IT because some of my mentors in college were doing it. And then I decided I would do cybersecurity because, why not? They were so hype about it. And then I did a competition called the National Cyber Analyst Challenge that Lockheed Martin did. This
Oh,
is
yeah.
back in 2016. So I was a sophomore in college. And so you imagine, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do cybersecurity, whatever the heck that means. Like, how do I break in? And so I'm like going on LinkedIn, I'm like looking at all these resources, like how to break into cybersecurity. I'm like taking after school classes. And so Lockheed says, hey, we have this challenge you can do, and it's a case study. Keep in mind at this point, I'm a business student, right? So I'm
Yeah.
doing like an IS degree at Howard University in DC. I'm like, yeah, we do a lot of case studies. So a normal case study, they give you a problem, you do some PowerPoint slides, and then you present it and you're on your way. So I signed up for this thing. And then a couple of days later, my professor says, here's a flash drive. They mailed this to you. Yeah. I'm
What?
like, why the heck would you need to mail me a physical flash drive, right? Like, that'll make no sense. You could have emailed it. You could
Yeah.
have like put it on Dropbox. You could do anything, but
Yeah.
why the heck did you mail it to me? And the reason they mailed it is because there was like 80 gigabytes of data that they gave to us. And so
Wow.
they had taken like 80 gigabytes of like intrusion data. They had the PCAP and like, forensics files and all
Hmm.
types of stuff, and like literally mailed it to us and said like, hey, go figure out what the heck happened in that data. And I had no idea what I was like way in over my head. I have no clue how to even get started with this. Like I
That is
had a
so
little like
wild.
Lenovo laptop with like the lowest amount of like RAM. So like I opened up one of the log files and my entire computer crashed and it was a wrap. Um,
That's crazy.
but yeah, but I mean, we put in work, right? Like I started asking questions, started figuring out things slowly. And it was at that point, like doing that and like starting to figure out, like I figured out like where the data was being exfiltrated by like doing some Wireshark stuff, put in that joint in Excel, and then like being like, oh, look, like here's like a lot of data leaving the network.
Yeah.
And after that experience, I was like, oh man, like this is fun. This is what I want to do for a living. Like I would
Yeah.
enjoy doing this in the long run. And so that's kind of what really like kicked off my cybersecurity career, right? Because I
Yeah.
leveraged that to get an internship at Lockheed Martin. And then after Lockheed, went to grad school, came back, worked full time for them 2 years, just doing SOC work. So I was an intern co-op,
Yeah.
worked there for 2 years. And then after that, I went to work for Microsoft doing threat intelligence. But I've been doing literally that same kind of work that I did in that first case study experience, and that's
Yeah.
exactly what I still do today, and it's a lot of fun.
Oh man, so many things I want to pull from that. First is like Excel, dude. Like when I got cybersecurity, like like you're all into like Splunk and all the like fun, like cool tools, and then you like get to a point it's like Excel is literally like doing everything you needed to do for you. Like it's literally doing all the analysis, visualizations. And I'm like, wow, like this is what my career has turned into. But it's kind of crazy, like that full circle moment though, like of going from that point of like getting this massive amount of data to analyze, and like essentially that turned into like your actual like career, over the course of this period of time. But that sounds so interesting. And like I love asking this question first because every single time I talk with the guests like on the podcast, and this is like probably like we're like it's like episode 20 something, every
Yeah.
single individual has a different story. Like there's never been like, oh, this is similar. Every single individual has a very unique and different story. It's always so cool to hear like all the different unexpected anecdotes that some people have with regards to how they go into cybersecurity or what actually got their interest in the field. And it's so cool to like hear yours as well. But another thing I want to pull out of that story is like college, right? So you said you were previously doing business, and then you started an internship with Lockheed Martin in your sophomore year of college. That is somewhat similar to my journey as well, but I was majoring in cybersecurity. I started my internship like sophomore year of college, but more so regarding to your experience. So what was it like going from like, I imagine like first year or freshman year of college, you were, majoring in business, right? And then between freshman year of college and then sophomore year of college, like that's about a year span. So much changed in your life or your experience that you went from business to now probably studying cybersecurity and also interning at Lockheed Martin doing cybersecurity. What crazy thing happened, like I mean beyond just that analysis thing within that year that just changed everything all around, that you were going from just being a business major to now being a cybersecurity intern at a major company like that?
Yeah, I will say though, like I actually did graduate, so I have actually two business degrees, right? So my first business degree is in information
Okay.
systems. So it's like you do like finance and accounting and marketing, and then like you do some IT on top, like understanding how to work that. And then kind of my second business degree I got in grad school is in tech policy, and so a lot of like the technical stuff I've done when it comes to cybersecurity is self-taught, right? And I enjoyed going that route because it gave me a lot of the flexibility to pick what I want to learn personally.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but from that first year, actually, when I first started, I decided I wanted to do accounting. That's what I wanted to do. I went to the
Wow.
library and I started like I swear on everything. I went to the library, I cracked open an accounting book, I started reading it. I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get this. And I felt like
That's insane.
like I'm not doing this. It's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. So I decided I was going to try something else. And, I had a first internship and I was like, yeah, like I'm trying to do cyber. And they were like,
Yeah.
yeah, well, you're going to have to wait a couple years to get to the good part. And I'm like, I'm not trying to do that. Like I'm trying to get to the
Yeah.
interesting part like as soon as possible. And I was lucky enough, to have a lot of mentors around me. I went to an HBCU, I went to Howard, and I had a lot of, folks that I looked up to, right? Like, Black professors like me who were like spending their free time just like teaching folks about tech and programming and this type of stuff. And so that was a
Yeah.
big advantage because I got to spend a lot of time like listening and being exposed to this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so by the time I did that competition, I at least had the audacity to try, right? Like I could have folded over and
Yeah.
be like, nah, like I'm good, like this is too much, I'm
Yeah.
over my head, like I quit. But I
Yeah.
said, you know what, like the worst I can do is fail here,
Yeah.
right? I'm gonna try something. And I did not know what I was doing, but I knew I tried. Like probably the best thing that came out of that competition was we performed horribly. Like in the
Yeah.
first round, we figured out what happened. In the second round of competition, we did like even worse. But the
Wow.
most important thing that came out of it was that like we were trying and we did our best
Yeah.
and we were passionate about it. And that's
Yeah.
actually what ended up getting me the internship, as opposed to being like, oh, like this person knew the most about like networking or knew the most about like incident response than anybody else.
Yeah.
Like this person cares more about this stuff than maybe anyone else in the room and has the most energy for it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's real because yeah, I know in cybersecurity we have like very, very like extremely skilled people, just in tech in general. Like there are people that are extremely skilled, but I think ultimately when it comes down to like a hiring decision, like managers are looking for like this person really care about the mission here, really care about cybersecurity. I care about, if it's like a company where it's like customer centric, would they care about our customers? Would they care about protecting people? Like that's what, they're ultimately looking for. And if you're able to demonstrate that in addition with, skills, right, I think that's like ultimately the best combination. But I still want to like continue on with regards to like your college experience and like your career starting at that point, because I relate to that a lot in a sense that you did this co-op throughout your college experience. So that meant that you had to combine both school and like full-time work at the same time all the way through graduation. And you graduated. I dropped out multiple times, but I eventually graduated. But I think what I want to bring out there, and I would love for you to share, is like combining, like your college education, but also getting experience on the side as well. Because a lot of people go to school for cybersecurity these days, right? College degrees for cybersecurity, but sometimes they're typically waiting till like end of their degree to like start looking for jobs. While you could actually start looking for internships or co-ops during your college experience. So the thing about that though is the fact that it's actually pretty difficult to do, and you definitely know how that is like. But in your experience, like what was that like combining like both school and like this co-op like throughout the period of your college experience? Like how did you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, that was the most important thing, right? Making sure that you have that internship experience
Yeah.
before you graduate, because it's so much harder when you graduate if you don't already have experience to try to apply, right? Because everyone's like looking for someone who they don't have to take forever to train. So, when I did my first internship, and then at the end of the summer, right, someone said, hey, like it's possible to like extend this throughout the year. And I talked to my
Mm,
manager and I was like, hey, like if it's possible, I'd like to, stay on, come in a couple of times a week. And they said, yeah. And so every like a couple times a week, I will go in there and I'm just sitting there and I'm just like working with data, right? Or like I'm like working incidents, or I'm like tracking threat actors. But as an intern, there's not as much pressure on you, right? Because when you're a full-time
yeah.
employee, they're paying you that big salary, right? You're
Yeah.
like, I need that return on my investment. So there's a lot more
Yeah.
pressure on like what you need to deliver. But when you're an intern and they're paying you a couple bucks an hour, they're like, okay, sure, like you can try stuff, you can fail. And so it was just
Yeah.
essentially like an experimentation ground for me, where I could just like literally ask people questions a couple of times a week. I can get used
Yeah.
to what the tools are doing. I could go do experimental things that maybe they don't want a full-time analyst to do. And so that was
Yeah.
just a really good opportunity for me to learn stuff. And then also just like apply it back to my classes, right? So,
Yeah.
I'm in class and my teachers are saying something, and then I can go back to work and I can ask people like, hey, like how much of this is true? Like how much of this is relevant? So I can kind of
Yeah.
check my teachers on both sides and say like, okay, well, this part of my class is relevant. This is how it actually is done in the real world versus this part is like not relevant at all.
Mm,
So that, I mean, that was really good. It is tough to balance though, right? Because you have to imagine you're doing a lot of work, right? And then you
yeah.
also have to remember you have your homework, and I'm also driving back and forth between the two, like in
Yeah.
the middle of the day. So it starts to get a lot, but I think, part of it is just like, focusing and like reprioritizing like what's important, and that's what helps you get through it, or helped me get through it. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
one semester I was taking 25 credits. I was taking 9 classes because I was thinking about graduating early. So I was doing that, and I was
Wow.
doing my co-op, and I was doing a couple other things. So I had a lot of my plate. And so, what helped me get through that, right, was just like, okay, like these are the only things that I care about, right? Are you talking about
Yeah.
homework? If not, don't talk to me. You talking about like work? If not,
Yeah.
don't talk to me. Like
Yeah.
I'm fully locked in to what I'm
Yeah.
doing here. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, that experience helped me out, because by the time I graduated, right, I had my full time offer, which means I could go to grad school, not worry about getting a job, right?
Yeah.
I already had a job in, so it didn't really matter what I did, right? I could just like enjoy the academics. And then when I
Yeah.
joined full time, right, it didn't take me a year to onboard, right? I walked in, sat down, and I knew exactly what to do, right? Like day
Yeah.
one, I
Yeah.
already knew what all the tools are, I knew all the people, I already knew the processes. So I can
Yeah.
jump in there and I can start contributing to investigations on like minute one, right?
Yeah.
Which is a
Yeah.
huge advantage because it just like propels your career, and you don't have to be as frustrated at the beginning.
Yeah, that was literally a cheat code, like literally like being able to like go from like, graduating, starting full time, and like you're able to onboard really fast. Because another thing that's like super that's like differentiates people is like how quickly are you able to onboard, right? Like if you're someone that's like, you've been here, you've been through the processes, you've done the work, you know the people, all of that stuff, like that makes you a lot more of makes you more of an asset to the company than someone who's just like, fresh and brand new. So it definitely like helps with like, speeding up that onboarding process, but also like making you more of an asset because you have, all that experience. And like you said, but with the internship, you're able to, do stuff without the added pressure of like what it would be like full time, right? It's like you're still like this person with not much experience, and no one necessarily expects you to like do advanced level stuff. So it's an opportunity to like fail and also learn from that, and also just like learn from other people who have a lot more experience. So I think it's definitely an avenue that a lot more people should consider. It definitely is going to be a lot more stressful to combine like full time work or internship with college, but eventually it pays dividends with like your career after college. So with that being said, how did your career transition from internship, college, grad school, full time at Lockheed into Microsoft? What was that transition like for you? Hey there. Did you know that 70% of our YouTube viewers aren't subscribed? If you're part of the group, please consider hitting that subscribe button. We're aiming to reach 50,000 subscribers by the year's end, and your support would mean a whole lot. Thank you so much for your help with this. And now let's get back to the video.
Yeah, I was, when I was at Lockheed, I was doing a lot of incident response slash, SOC analyst work. And while I was there, I realized that that threat intelligence was something I was interested in, right? So I was interested in, thinking about the actual threat actors that are doing the work
Yeah.
and figuring out how to track infrastructure, how to cluster them, how to do that attribution work. And so I started, almost specializing, right? And I think people, whenever you're in a role, people start naturally gravitating towards whatever they're most interested in. So some people gravitate towards forensics and some people gravitate towards reverse engineering. And for me, it was gravitating towards, threat intelligence and understanding how threat actors behave and how to track their activity. And so, I was specialized in Middle East threat actors by accident completely. And then, the call came, about 2 years into my career. I had a chance there was a job posting for a Microsoft job. And, I was fairly young, right? Fairly new out of college, but I was like, you know what, like I'm going to shoot my shot and see what happens. Like worst case happens, worst case, I'll talk to someone, in an interview, I'll build some relationships or learn something new, shot a full court shot, got an interview. I was like, whoa. And then I did the interview and it was like, it went well. And then I got an offer and I was like, holy cow. And then that's when I got a chance to, work in Mystic. And, Mystic is a first party threat intelligence shop. So you think about like the typhoons and the sleets and all that stuff. That's, we work on threat actors and figuring out how to take that and use that to protect customers. So I got a chance to go and work on that mission, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, that was really just a story about like, for me, it was a story about like, don't say no before you let somebody else say no for you, right? Like, don't reject yourself and like go out there and maybe something will happen if you shoot your shot. And that was I was telling a lot of other people that, and then it came to that and I was like, all right, like I got to take my own advice.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. Completely agree with the fact that don't like reject yourself before someone else rejects you. If I would paraphrase that, like don't be the one to kind of like block that opportunity for yourself because you feel like, oh, I'm not qualified enough for that, or even some people to the point of like feel like they don't deserve certain opportunities. Like definitely like put your name in the hat, like put yourself out there and like let whoever is in charge of the decisions like decide if you're qualified or not. So definitely, I think that's amazing. Like I cannot imagine what it's like working in Mystic because like I imagine the scale and like the complexity and the intricacies of like the threat actors and behaviors you're tracking is like probably going to be insane. And that leads me to my next question about threat intelligence. Like as a whole, given your career, given what you do right now, if I was someone who didn't really know where my career is like going towards, or someone who was possibly considering going into threat intelligence, like what should I be thinking of? Like how should I look at threat intelligence? What skills would I need? Like if I were trying to like go towards the threat intelligence route of security, because it's like you said, it's a niche. This is something that you kind of specialize in. So like what's that like? What is threat intelligence, and like how would I move my career towards it?
Yeah, I mean CTI is one of like the more niche fields when it comes to cybersecurity, right? So you have cybersecurity as a whole. There's all these different components of it. You have like the red team versus blue team, and the blue team side, you have your incident responders, you have your SOC analysts. Threat intelligence is like the part of it's like I would say it's like the concentrated blue team part. So it's about like understanding threat actors and understanding how they behave, how to cluster them, and then how to do attribution. When people talk about CTI or cyber threat intelligence, there's like a couple of different components that they might be talking about. Sometimes they're talking about like, well, regular companies think they might be talking about like in-house CTI. And then there's like the difference between like in-house CTI and like vendor like threat intelligence. So, if you're working for like a Microsoft or a CrowdStrike or a Proofpoint, right, where you are a vendor and you have a lot more visibility, then you might be producing threat intelligence, right? You might be publishing blogs, you might be, publishing indicators that you use to protect your customers, et cetera. So you have like a much wider view versus like if you're in-house, you don't really usually have a need to like follow the threat actors. Usually you
Yeah.
just want to figure out what everyone is saying and figuring out how you can use that to improve your defenses, right? So, hey, we
Yeah.
have an IP address. How can I use that to understand the context of how can I use CTI, what's written out there to understand
Yeah.
the context of that indicator within my intrusion to like speed up my investigations? Like, should I care about this? Should I not care about this? The tough part about CTI, or like, how do you get into CTI? Normally, kind of the basis, the fundamental of like getting to CTI is getting those like core like investigative skills, right? Like your core like SOC analyst, incident response type skills. Like I got an IP, I got a domain, like what can I go and do with that? So that's going to be the core foundation. So if you talk to a lot of CTI folks, a lot of those folks tend to be like former like intel folks or like former like defenders. But if you didn't come from like a military background, like the most likely path is going to be like through a cyber defense like SOC type role where you get the fundamentals of like how do you defend against threat actors, how do you understand what they do, how do you think about like defending against them. And then as you go, like you're going down that rabbit hole, right? You go from, okay, how can I just like arbitrarily or just like how can I just indiscriminately defend against threat actors, and how can I think more specifically about how different threat actors behave? Because not all threat actors do the same things, right? Like they do different things for different reasons, right? You have cyber criminals and they're trying to make some money, and you have like nation state adversaries, they're trying to like steal something, but they're thinking about like geopolitical aspirations. So it's about thinking how those behave differently and how do you cluster indicators or things that you see to say, okay, this is one bucket of things, this is the second bucket of things, this is the third bucket of things. Now, again, easier said than done, because usually the hardest part of that, right, is, okay, well, you need to practice on something. And 9 times out of 10, right, people will say, okay, well, go read this article about what X person wrote. Go read this blog, go read this book, which is cool and all, but like at the end of the day, like usually it comes down to just like being in the right place at the right time, right? Like if you're at the place that is, data rich, where you can see a lot of cool threat actor activities, you're gonna learn a lot faster. But if you're at a place where, you're just like resolving false positives all day, or you have an MSSP taking care of a thing, it's going to be hard to learn how to like cluster threat actors if you've only seen one, right? That's a difficult thing to do, which is part of, again, the KC7 story is like making that data available so you can actually learn how to do that type of stuff. So we can talk a little bit more about that. But if you're lucky enough to be in a place that has rich data, it's just about like, pushing for like, I think pushing internally towards and showing your interest in doing that type of thing, and like letting your managers know that this is what you want to do, so that when those opportunities arise, they'll give you the opportunity to do that, which is what I did.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for going into those details. And we're going to talk about KC7 like for the rest of the podcast, which I'm very sure like, was, like you said, like kind of born out of like the need to like have a rich data set for you to practice on with regards to building those skills, whether it's threat intelligence or like general cyber defense. But if you can, I know that we're in a field where there's like a lot of sensitivity to our work, but if it's like public research, publicly available, is there any kind of like case that you're able to speak on? Let's say like a specific threat actor that you tracked or your team tracked, and like this is like a really big one. Like, is there anything like that you can share, like that would kind of give us like a perspective of a day in the life, or like a month or a year in the life of a threat intelligence professional?
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of crazy thing out there. Nowadays I'm more focused on ransomware, but for a couple of years there was I was focused on Middle East threat actors, and there was an Iranian threat actor that was a pretty insane case. It's publicly known as Curium or Tortoiseshell, and I think there's a couple blogs. I think there's like a Facebook blog and a good Proofpoint blog written about this that you can go and search. I don't know what the Proofpoint name is. And there's a Microsoft blog that we wrote for CyberWorkCon as well. But this is a threat actor that was really good at social engineering and really bad at malware. right? They're like really
Mm.
good at like the people stuff and not so
Yeah.
good at like the technical stuff. So when people usually think about like what hackers do, or like they're like, oh yeah, like exploit 0 day and get into the wire and some crazy technical thing, right? But these guys were, state sponsored, and they were quite the opposite, right? And so what they did was they would like set up these like social media profiles as
Mm.
like attractive women, and they would hit these guys up at these companies and say, hey, I just want to be your friend, in a work setting, of course, right? This be like, hey,
Mm.
uh, connect with me, and then they'd be like, oh, I want to be your friend, and you'd be like, wait, why are you all of a sudden interested in me wanting to be my friend? They'd be like, let's take this
Yeah.
conversation elsewhere. And so all of a sudden, before you know, the targets are having these conversations for like long periods of time. Like imagine like 3, 4, 5, 6, 5 times a day for hours on end. They're having really long conversations with the threat actor. I mean, literally
Mm.
like building romantic relationships with the threat actor.
Wow.
And then eventually the threat actor, like after months, will like deliver some like really crappy malware. But you imagine like I want you to like put yourself in the shoe of the victim, for example, right? Like, you
Yeah.
have a special someone, right? And you're telling your homeboy, like, like that's my girl, like I've been talking
Yeah.
to her, like I got the
Yeah.
riz, like she loves me, like all this stuff. And then come to find out, like, y'all made it official. You're like 8 months into it, like you thinking about like popping a ring out.
Yeah.
She's not real. Like
Yeah.
literally, like she's an APT somewhere across the world. Like you've been got. And
Oh
sometimes,
man.
there's a lot of that is like romance scams, and like they're trying to get you for
Yeah.
your money. But this one's a little bit creepier, right? Because they're like trying to
Yeah.
get you for the work that you're doing. But they know that, so they're
Yeah.
not gonna ask you about work. They're not gonna ask you about anything. But then like right at the tail end, they're gonna be like, run this malware. But it's like really like terrible malware.
Wow.
And the reason that matters is that since they're not so good at writing code, they need you to like the defenses are gonna catch it really quickly, right? So they
Yeah.
need you to run it multiple times and test that joint out, right?
Wow.
So if you're in love with this lady
Yeah.
and she's like, all right, like open this file for me, like on your work computer, like now
Yeah.
do it like 5, 6, like open it, like she wants you to debug that joint, right? Like she's like click ignore on the alert, right?
Yeah.
Like get past all that and
Yeah.
and get this joint to run. And so the malware
Yeah.
may be terrible, and in any other context, right? Like that joint gets caught, the sock's gonna be all
Yeah.
over it. But
Yeah.
if this person's like, okay, this is legit, and my love is sending it to me, they're gonna execute it as many times as they need to get it to run. So
Yeah.
it's a very interesting case of like the threat actors kind of like realizing their capabilities and like shifting
Yeah.
to like address some of those cases. And so I think
Yeah.
in the threat intelligence world, right, it's about like uncovering those things that you would never predict threat actors are doing, right? Because when we think about what threat actors do, think about like remote exploitation, you think about phishing, but nobody would have ever like that came out of left field, right? Because you have all your
Yeah.
logs, you got all your alerts, and this thing just magically appears, and you're like, how the
Yeah.
heck did this thing get there?
Yeah.
Threat intel is about like trying to predict and like understand those things and like get that full story for someone before they got to learn that lesson for themselves.
Yeah. That is insane that, someone could literally be in an online relationship with the actual APT, like just straight up just like falling in love with the literal
Yeah,
nation state with who
but
constantly convert.
yeah, but there's a lot of that though, and
That's
there's a lot of like even like I've heard about like scams where like they're trying to get you to not even APT, but on the cybercrime stuff, they'll try to get you to invest in like fake crypto,
yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
it's tragic, right? Because you're like, oh,
Yeah.
like this is someone I care about, and all of a sudden, like they get you for all the money that you've gotten and then they're gone, right? And so there's not
Yeah.
just the cyber component of it, but like you have people who are like literally traumatized, right? Because you're
Yeah.
like, can I
Yeah.
ever love anyone again? Like, are you gonna steal my money? Like, are you going to
Literally.
steal my data? Are you gonna get me fired? It's traumatizing stuff.
Yeah, I imagine. This sounds like the modern version of like a spy movie of like US like versus like KGB spies or German spies where like the spy like gets the other person to fall in love with them and then boom they're using them to like get access to like some state secrets, which is kind of insane. And yeah, that just blows my mind. And like just the fact that they're literal like teams or like actual like government sponsored like organizations that are like literally like hands on keyboard, full-time job every single day, trying to target like other nations or other individuals as a means of like infiltrating systems is like it still blows my mind. I'm reading this book right now. It's called The Art of Cybercrime, and literally like all the different like stories about like all these different nation states, different like even finance or finance motivated actors, and like the actual lens to which they go to like either build relationships with people or like deploy malware into like hospital systems, whatever the case is. It just blows my mind the fact that there are little people out there that do that. But again, at the same time, it's still sort of reassuring to know that we are on the side that is focused on like analyzing these behaviors, bringing them together, understanding what they're doing, and figuring out ways to prevent them, mitigate them, and remediate them. But with that said, though, let's talk about KC7, which is actually how I found you online. So I've known about KC7 for a while, and I'm hoping that in the coming weeks or coming months we can actually do a couple of walkthroughs together on the channel. But you hinted earlier on the podcast to having like rich data to like investigate on, practice on, build your skills on. But I wanted you to dig more into that about like how did KC7 start and like how has it grown into what it is right now. Here at CyberWalks, our mission is simple: to provide top-notch cybersecurity education and career guidance to help you succeed. We've been consistently delivering on this promise for over 4 years. With our expanded resources, we're better equipped than ever to support you. If you're looking for more career advice on cybersecurity engineering, personal growth, productivity, and even job opportunities, then check out our CyberWalks Unplugged newsletter. You can subscribe at cyberwalksunplugged.com or use the link in the description. You can also join our thriving community of about 5,000 cybersecurity enthusiasts on the CyberWalks Academy. Here, you can find mentorship, coaching, career help, and a supported network to boost your growth at every stage of your cybersecurity career. Whether you're into offensive security, defensive security, cloud security, DevOps, DevSecOps, or even have interests like anime, watches, personal finance, or cars, there's a channel where fellow cybersecurity enthusiasts are eager to connect with you. If you need help landing your first job, we've got you covered with our resume template for entry-level professionals and our comprehensive career plan and Notion template to chart your path to success. And if you're a fan of our Cyber Stories podcast, it's now available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So don't forget to subscribe or follow and leave a rating to support our mission of making cybersecurity accessible to everyone. And finally, I am super excited about our upcoming winter merch drop for the CyberWalks Essentials collection, which will be live soon. It's going to be amazing. So in order to make sure that you don't miss out on that, head over to store.cyberworks.com and sign up for our mailing list so that you'll be notified as soon as we release this collection. Look, we deeply appreciate your support and are committed to continually expanding our resources to make cybersecurity education, community, and career guidance more accessible. Now, let's dive back into the video.
Yeah, so I'll continue the story I told earlier. I talked about how I worked on that one data set and it changed the entire trajectory of my life. But that was only available to like, you think about like, there were like 6 colleges times 5 people per team. So it was like 30 people in total who got that experience. And even in that experience, right, like it was like 5 Black people in the room. It was like me and 4 of my coworkers. I mean, my college teammates. And I'm like, okay, like we got to do something about the diversity problem. And I was willing to bet that if you could bring this sort of experience to like more Black people, and not just Black people, because that was what's important to me, but like people of like different backgrounds, you would have a lot more people of backgrounds who didn't even know about cyber who would care about this stuff. And so for a couple of years, I thought about like, how do I reproduce all that stuff? But, I'm not a red teamer and I have no money, so I can't like build up any like cloud infrastructure that's going to like run me thousands of dollars. And, I can't, so I'm not going to like run an engagement and like siphon logs and do all that stuff. So I want to cheat around it. And so the very first one I built was like, I tried like by hand to build a data set that could like at least kind of get you like a story. We just talked about like that like the spy stuff that like gets people interesting. Like get the logs, but like put a story on it that someone could actually care about. And so the first one I built by hand was like Soul Glow. It was after the movie Coming to America. Very popular Black movie. Eddie Murphy comes from what was it, Zamunda? But Zamunda. That was a theme of the investigation, right? And I just like did it by hand, and I gave it to my professor who was teaching a community college class, and he used it, and he was like, "Yeah, my students love this. Can you make another one?" I said, "All right, like I can't be making these by hand," and so I started working on a small Python engine to automatically generate the data. And fast forward like 4 or 5 years, I kept working on this thing and it started like ballooning and I started like adding more features, trying to figure out like what is the easiest way to get this into people's hands. And so when people like usually build this
Mm,
stuff, they think like, okay, like it works technically, I'm like done here. But I'm thinking about like my own experience just having gotten into college. If this joint is too technical for someone to set up, like
yeah,
it's cool, but nobody's going to use it. No one's ever going to get their
yeah,
hands on it. It's not going to see the light of day. And it might see the
yeah.
light of day for you and your homies who are technical enough to use it. But for everyone else, no one else
Hmm.
is going to, right? And so I spent a lot of time thinking about how do I get this in people's hands. And then, I got my buddy Greg at Microsoft, right? I came up to him one day and I said, hey, there's a tool called Azure Data Explorer that we use. It's like a Microsoft product that you can just like put logs in the cloud. I was like, if we can like put our logs in here, we can get this into the hands of a lot of people like really
Yeah,
quickly. And so that was kind of a cheat code where, after about 5 years, we figured out how to create an engine that makes these really cool and like very realistic, but like simplified cybersecurity data sets. And then we
right.
get you access to that in like about 5 seconds, right? And so normally it's like, oh, you got to download this thing and wait an hour for this thing to download and download this tool and set up this proxy. We're like, click here, click here, click here. Here's your data, right? And
Yeah.
once we kind of figured out those pieces, right, we started experimenting with different demographics, and we realized that people enjoyed this stuff a lot more than we anticipated. And so we
Yeah.
grew from, just a side project where we wanted to have one hackathon to I think today we're at about like 12,000 people having registered for a platform and growing, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, I have a lot more stories around that. But essentially, what we
Yeah.
created is a way to have really cool cybersecurity data that essentially allows you to compress your learning, right?
Mm,
Like essentially compress what would be about like months of SOC experience into a couple hours,
wow.
right? And if you do that over and over and over again, what
Yeah.
essentially you get is you can train someone and give them about like, 5, 6, 7 years of SOC experience in just a matter
Yeah.
of months. Like if they go
Yeah.
through the data, because you're taking like because you think about the graph of like learning, it's like slow, 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 high impact event. You learn a lot, and
Yeah.
then it's like back to the
Yeah.
daily grind, slow, 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 slow.
Yeah.
We're taking all the highlights and we're just like condensing it and we're just like putting it on your lap so that you just learn like hyper speed using this data.
Wow. Wow.
It's also good at learning threat intel. We can also talk about that. But the core of it is that like we simplify it, give you an on-ramp to like, hey, this is not so scary, get you to work with, interact with the data, learn some like basic cybersecurity skills. And then like it just keeps getting harder and harder and harder. And before you know it, you're doing some really complicated technical stuff. You're doing like tier 3, tier 4 SOC analyst work. And like you're like, wait, like how did I get here? Like playing this
Yeah.
stupid game.
No, that is actually insane. And the way you put it, like, actually puts into perspective, like, the skill, like, your ability to, like, learn a lot faster from, like, very specific things, right? Because,
Yeah.
like you said, like, if you're working in a SOC environment, like, you're not going to be dealing with, like, APTs or, like, nation states or, like, even high profile events every single day. Let's say you do it, like, a couple of times a year, maybe 1 or 2 times you have major of those incidents, like, in a year. But imagine, like, being able to, like, get all of this information from various like different experiences, different like high impact events, and having and being able to like do all of those like the ones where it mattered the most. So you're able to like get the skills required to understand what the actor did, how they did it, analyze it, and like you have multiple of those. I can definitely see like the possibility of like building those skills a lot faster than someone who's like gonna spend a lot of time in a SOC environment, MSSP environment, and have to like go through the motions of those years, those time periods to build those skills. And it's kind of amazing. And this is my first time hearing you put it that way, but it puts into perspective, some of the success stories that you've had from KC7. And I would love for you to share a couple if you can, because like that also like highlights, what the outcome is from literally practicing on this kind of data and building your skills from there. So like what have been like some of the highlights or like outcomes of people actually using KC7 and like learning from it, building their cybersecurity skills from it?
I would say there's a
Oh,
couple of
sorry.
different categories of successes that we've seen. The
Yeah.
first one is about people who didn't even think cybersecurity was a thing they could be interested in at all, and
Mm,
them decided like, hey, this is a thing that I might want to do for my career. The second is people who thought about cybersecurity and being able to use it to like get an entry point into like security and get into it, improve their skills, get a job, get a promotion, etc. And then of course you have people who are already in security being able to like, improve their skills so they can just become better defenders. In the
mm,
first guy, maybe I'll touch on a story from all three categories. The first one we've had a lot of, right? And the first one I really had was I did a summer camp with students at Howard, like Howard, high school students. They were like in this like IT camp, and I was just supposed to present for a day or two. This is like the very first time I'm like, I figured out how to get the data, access the data to people faster, and I'm testing it out for the very first time. So you have these like
yeah.
15, 16-year-old black kids who are forced to go to this thing. And like, here's this guy who walks in the room, and I look kind of young, right? Because I have like no facial hair. And so they're like, is this
Yeah.
the professor? Like, is this the guy? No, he's just a student here or something. But like, I take them through the experience and I teach them about cybersecurity from the ground up. And I give them this game and I'm like, okay, like I'm going to teach you the basics of it. I'm going to leave. You guys are going to work on this. I'm going to come back. And I come back and
Yeah.
these kids are giving me like high quality, like cybersecurity intrusion reports. And they're
Wow.
like very, very, very passionate about it. Right. And this is like very early days on. And I'm like, if these kids can have such, and a lot of them, right, as a result of that experience, actually decided, hey, they wanted to go to Howard because that's where the camp was, and decided to major in like cybersecurity and IT, computer science related things. And like they came back, and I saw them a couple years later on campus, and they're like, hey, like this was the experience for me. And I was like, if these
Wow.
kids can have that experience that I had a couple years back, then like this is all worth working on, right? And so we've had so many of these experiences where people are like, I don't care about cybersecurity. This is going to be lame. And they go through our stuff and they're like, whoa, like this is so cool. Like this feels
Yeah.
like, being a spy or being a detective. Like I can't
Yeah.
believe no one ever framed it this way. So that's a
Yeah.
lot of the successes we had. And then we have successes of people who, start from scratch, find our platform, and they just grind their way to like success. The biggest one is, my friend Jibby, who I always tell the story, but he's a watchmaker out in LA. And in the early days of cyber, I did a presentations at Sands New to Cyber. This is like super early days, right? So our platform barely worked. It was like some janky Python code. Literally that jump was like, I think that jump was like crashing right. I was about to go on
That's
stage. That jump
wild.
was crashing. I stepped on stage. I said a prayer. I was like, I hope this jump stays up. And I went on
Oh
stage and I
man.
said, hey, here's this game we have. And if you play it, right, I give the same exact talk I just gave. If you play it, you will get like condensed learning that will help you get into a cybersecurity career. And so Jibby was
Yeah.
like across the country in LA, he was in his shop and he was like just getting interested in cybersecurity. He was like, hey, his friend had just told him about it. He was like, hey, maybe I'll try this, maybe I won't. And he was like, I'll try this little game out. And he started playing, and like he joined our competition, and he wouldn't always be like the first, like the top of the leaderboard at the end of the event, right? But after the event, he would come back and he would just grind until he came back to the top. Like not during the
Yeah.
event, but after the event. And then we'd
Yeah.
have another one, and then he'd be like somewhere in the middle. And then afterwards, a lot of like after the most competitions, people would like go home and they'll never look at it again. He would come back
Yeah.
and he would grind it out and figure out all the questions and get back to the top. And he kept doing
Wow.
that over and over and over and over. And he would like do literally all of our content. And so
Wow.
Jimmy went from like, a guy who was sort of kind of interested in security to like knowing his stuff. And so we came out
Yeah.
at DEF CON with like our gnarliest, like hardest cybersecurity challenge, like password spray, lateral movement, data exfiltration, like encoding everything, like throwing everything in the kitchen sink at it. And he came back
Yeah.
in a couple, it took him, I think it took him 3 days. He looked at that Joan and he was like, oh yeah, I solved the entire thing. And I was like, you do know that this is a requirement for like, not a tier 1, not a tier 2, but like a senior, like only like a super senior cybersecurity analyst with like years of experience would be expected to be able to like do anything like this. I'm like, you do not
Yeah.
understand what you have done. But in just the span of a year, he went from like literally like 0 to like being a really skilled SOC analyst. And like if you talk with him, right, and he's answering people questions, people are like, oh, like where do you work? Like how long have you been doing this? He's like, I've literally never worked in IT or cybersecurity before. I just like play this game, bro. And so his story is really cool because he ended up getting hired at
Yeah.
Microsoft at a senior level job. So he went from like literally like no college degree, no IT background, no cybersecurity background, played a game for a year and a half, and then like landing a job at Microsoft. And so
Wow.
when I tell people about the power of like, but it sounds a little bit ridiculous, right? Because it's such a
Yeah.
serious topic. Someone's like, okay,
Yeah.
like I'm trying to change my life. I'm trying to go into this new career path. I'm trying to do
Yeah.
this very serious thing. And they come to me, they're like, how should I do it? And I'm like, you should play a game. And they're like, get
Yeah.
out of my face, man. Like I'm talking about something so serious. And you're talking about a
Yeah.
game, man. This
Wow.
is not a game. This is serious. And I'm like, no, like
Wow.
this is a game that it's a game, yes, but it's a game that
Yeah.
will like give you the skills to maybe like transform your life or at least transform the way that you think.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That is amazing. I chatted with him like a few weeks back, and I know he's like we chatted a few weeks back, and he told me about that, and I was like, that's like very, very impressive. Like, and just the ability to like have something like this, that could essentially transform your skills and your life around is like amazing. Like years ago, we didn't have this, right? Like years ago, we didn't have something like this, and it's totally free. So like being able to like have access to this resource is just amazing. And kudos to you and the team, and all the other folks who are contributing to this platform for the work you're doing there. It's really, really amazing. And I'm actually looking forward to like, the couple of investigations we might do here soon. But this has been a great conversation. It's very inspiring. It's very motivating. It's much appreciated that there are people out there that are, doing this work to like further our community, further diversity in our community, further skill building in our community, further the ability for people to like access affordable training and education in this industry, and also spark their interest early. So kudos to you and the team that's doing all this work. To run our conversation up, I want to ask you like, what's next for KC7 and what's next for Simeon?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're trying to redefine the way cybersecurity is thought is what KC7 is trying to do. Like whether or
Yeah,
not it's us or someone else is going to do it, like we're trying to change the conversation around like who can be in cybersecurity and how cybersecurity
yeah,
should be taught so that more people can get in the industry. And so,
yeah,
yes, we have this game. Yes, we're doing cool things now. But if we succeed, whether or not we're the ones who do it or not, we're trying to change the way that everyone thinks about how that learning is done and how we should give people access. And what we found along the way, you said, it's not just me doing this. We got a whole team of people doing this. Is
yeah,
about, a lot of people love cybersecurity, like genuinely, and they love the work that we do. And they
yeah,
love trying to make that accessible for people. Like so many times, like, oh, I wish I could have had this. So it's like not just
yeah,
about being here, but creating space for others. So that's what we're trying to continue to do. We're trying to get this in front of more people because I believe, stories like Jibby's are not isolated. I believe that if
yeah,
we can get this game, this free resource in front of a lot more people at all ages, at all backgrounds, and all locations, we're going to find a lot of superstars that we have been missing out on the entire time. So that's what I'm,
yeah,
I'm committed to. And, personally, professionally, I'm continuing doing threat intel. I love what I do, and lucky for me, it overlaps with the work I do with KC7, and I'm
yeah,
excited about continuing to meet new cool people along the way. I think part of the KC7 journey is just like, getting to meet you, Day. I probably would have never met you if not for KC7, right? So
yeah,
getting to meet a lot of cool
yeah,
people who are doing a lot of
yeah,
awesome work in like different ways and like seeing how we can, but people who are passionate about like helping others and giving
yeah,
opportunity to others and how we can
yeah,
work together to do that, right?
yeah,
So, you think about like, blacks in cybersecurity I've worked a lot with, and women in
yeah,
cloud, and Black Girls Hack, and Rices and all these different organizations, all these people working like literally like outside their 9 to 5, and they're putting like
yeah,
people are putting in work out here and they're not getting
yeah,
paid for it. And why are they putting in work? Because they're trying to create a path for like somebody else. And
yeah,
that is a
yeah.
really cool thing that I think we need to talk about a little bit more.
Yeah, most definitely. I'm huge when it comes to like cybersecurity community, like just for me, it's just like being able to like provide resources or even connect people with resources. Like my channel is just like a central point for like resources. So like being able to be like that centralized point for people to like, get resources it's amazing. And like being able to share resources like KC7 is amazing. This has been a great conversation, Simeon. And like I said, I'm looking forward to a couple of investigations we'll do it here. My skills might be a little bit rusty, but looking forward to like, us like going through some KC7 cases and sharing it on the channel.
Yeah, I'm excited. Hey, the whole point point is that anybody can do it, right? And so we're
Yeah.
gonna have some fun together. We're gonna learn. We're gonna make mistakes, but it's gonna be all right. But thanks you so much for having me.
Yeah, most definitely. And thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye.
Take care.
Hey, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Cyber Stories podcast. We really appreciate your support. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to like and subscribe for future episodes and comment down below the one thing you learned from this podcast. Also, don't forget to check out the video description for various resources to kickstart or advance your cybersecurity career. You can also choose to binge on our previous episodes by clicking on this playlist on your screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.